Harry didn't find Meghan. Meghan found Harry. Not at a dinner table, not by accident, not through a mutual friend who thought two people might get along, through years of preparation. She did a vision board about Harry. That detail gets mentioned in passing without anyone sitting with it long enough to understand what it actually means. She sat down before the introduction was ever arranged and built a map of exactly what landing Harry would require. The charities, the language, music, the emotional vocabulary of a man who had lost his mother and never finished grieving. Diana saw this type coming. Not Meghan specifically, this type. The type who finds the wound and builds themselves into it. The type who doesn't love you, but learns to speak the language of what you need to hear. The question is never whether someone like this, music, gets exposed. The question is only when. Harry watched what happened to Andrew. The machine moved quietly, surgically, without headlines. One day, Andrew was there. The next day, he wasn't. This week, the machine turned in a new direction, Harry's direction. William said what Diana had already seen coming, long before Harry did. Stay with me. Because what Diana saw and what Meghan built her entire plan around Harry never understanding is the most important royal story of this decade, and the door is already moving. If you believe Diana's sons deserve someone willing to say what the palace won't, this channel was built for you. Subscribe now. Because this story is not finished, and you will want to be here when the next chapter lands. Harry didn't lack warnings. He had more warnings than almost any man in modern history. William tried. Philip tried. Diana's own friends tried. The staff who watched this unfold from inside Kensington Palace tried, gently, professionally, at personal cost to themselves. And not one of them got through because Meghan had built herself so precisely around what Harry needed that every warning sounded like an attack on something real. Harry watched this happen to person after person. He watched the people who loved him walk through the same door and come out the other side saying the same thing. Here is how it always went. The Sussex Survivors Club. That is what the former staff call themselves in private, at dinner parties in London, in quiet messages between people who served inside Kensington Palace and Frogmore Cottage, and on the Australian tour. They keep in touch. They check on each other. They share stories you will never read in a tabloid because the legal walls are too thick, music, and the NDAs are too binding. But they know what happened, and one day when those walls crack, the reckoning will land hard. Step 1, recruited with great fanfare. Step 2, arrive full of energy and ideas. Step 3, offer advice she disagrees with. Step 4, temperature in the room drops 10 degrees. Step 5, frozen out of meetings. Step 6, anonymous briefings appear calling you difficult. Step 7, you are gone. Step 8, your reputation has been quietly poisoned. That is the playbook. Sarah Lamb went through it. Clinton operation. Heavyweight. She told them the truth and she was gone. Every single person who tried was gone. Harry watched all of this and still couldn't see it. But here's what nobody connected yet. Because the warnings Harry received, as serious as they were, are not the deepest part of this story. The deepest part is what Meghan did with the information she found when she studied Harry's wound. Not Harry the prince. Harry the boy who never healed. Diana's death left a specific wound, not general grief. The wound of a boy who lost the one person who understood him completely, who sat with him at hospitals, who drove him to school in the front seat, who understood that her younger son needed different handling than her older one. That wound never fully healed. Meghan didn't find Harry the prince, she found Harry, the boy who never recovered. She found the gap Diana's absence had created. She found the shape of what he was missing. Harry had no idea. He was in London, in his apartment, carrying a grief nobody had properly helped him process. And she was building the map of how to walk into that grief and call it home. The vision board was not romantic. It was a blueprint. The charities she aligned herself with, the specific language she used in interviews about purpose and service, The way she carried herself at exactly the kind of events that would eventually connect her to the person who could arrange the introduction. This was not a woman finding her path. This was a woman walking along one. Ask yourself one question. Harry spent years saying publicly that he wanted someone strong, someone independent, someone who understood purpose without needing a crown to give it to her. And Meghan, studying that profile from the outside, built herself into every single word of it. She didn't speak the language of love. She spoke the language of everything Harry had been missing since 1997. And Harry, who never received the help he needed, heard that language and called it home. William saw this happening. He sent word. The security team had been running background checks, not on Meghan, on the circle around her. On the specific people whose careers were built on knowing where powerful men would be and ensuring the right introductions happened. Harry called it a smear campaign. He was wrong. Tell me in the comments, at what point do you think Harry started to understand what had actually happened to him? Because that answer changes everything about what he does next. Music, and here's what makes the whole picture devastating. She didn't just build herself into his grief. She built herself into his geography. Not Toronto. Not Vancouver Island, not the British countryside. California. The part of California that sits inside family courts that leans structurally toward the mother. Once Harry was in California, the trap was set. The message became, "You are with me for as long as I want you." The children are the deadbolt on a door that was never meant to open from the inside. That is not a metaphor. That is the legal reality of a trap built, music, with precision, placed in a jurisdiction chosen specifically because of what it would make impossible. Harry loves his children. Genuinely, visibly, painfully. And she knew that before she had them. She knew it was the design. Katie Holmes planned for months. Disposable phones, secret apartment, chosen jurisdiction. 11 days and it was over. Tom Cruise read about the end of his marriage on the front page of the newspaper. Harry has none of what Katie had. Not the family standing behind him with a plan. Not the jurisdiction, not the independent accounts, not the alternative housing. The trap was designed to be exactly this: complete. She knew he would never leave without the children. The children are the deadbolt. The public wants the rescue. They want the dramatic exit. They want Harry walking out of a courthouse with a new life. But Harry cannot take the children. And the man who gave up his entire family for those 2 children is not walking out of any door without them. So, what does William do? William does what the institution has always done with problems it cannot solve quickly. It waits. Watch what happened to Andrew. The machine moved quietly. Without headlines, without a vote in Parliament, without a single public announcement. Military titles stripped, patronages removed, His Royal Highness style retired from public use. The man edited out of the family photograph with a steady hand. None of it required a court case. It required exactly one thing. The will of the crown. And what William said this week, what Diana had already seen coming long before Harry did, is that the will of this particular crown has been forming quietly for a very long time. The public has been asking one question above everything else. Does William act now? The answer is not yes or no. The answer is that William does not need to act loudly. He needs to act the way the institution always acts. Quietly, patiently, music, irreversibly. The machine that removed Andrew did not announce itself. Neither will this one. And the people inside that California compound who are not sleeping well right now, understand that better than any tabloid headline ever could. But here is what the coverage never properly explained, because the institutional machinery is not the most devastating, music, part of what Diana saw coming. The most devastating part is personal. It goes back to 2 brothers, once inseparable, now separated by 6,000 miles, and a marriage that has cost one of them everything he was given. Diana understood the game. She understood it the way someone understands something that has cost them everything. She knew what it felt like when the people closest to her wanted something from her presence rather than from her as a person. And she spent years trying to give her sons the tools to recognize the same pattern when it arrived in their own lives. She taught them to watch, to ask one question above all others. Does this person want me, or do they want what being with me makes possible? Harry heard that lesson. And then Meghan arrived speaking exactly the language of what Harry had been missing, and the lesson simply did not fire. Diana could warn Harry about people who wanted his title. What she could not prepare him for, because it had never happened before, was someone who found the grief itself and used it. Who found the wound that Diana's own death had created and built a life inside it. The institution managed Diana. Meghan managed Harry. Same silence, different hands. And Diana, who paid for her understanding of this with everything she had, would have recognized it that she heard about the vision board. The charities aligned just so. The language in those early interviews. The specific way Meghan carried herself at events that were never accidental. Diana would have said quietly to whoever was in the room, "I know this type." William was in some of those rooms. He listened. And what William said this week, what Diana had been seeing coming since long before the blind date was arranged, is the confirmation that someone who was in those rooms has finally decided the waiting is over. Is there someone in your life who saw this coming before Harry did? Leave it in the comments. Because the responses to that question tell their own story every single time. By this point, you are probably asking, so, what actually happens now? Does William act immediately? Does he let time do the work? What happens to the titles? To the children? To the California life built specifically to be impossible to leave? Those answers are already in motion. And moving faster than anyone in California understands. Time is the variable nobody on the California side of this story has understood. William is younger than his father. He will be on that throne when Archie and Lilibet are teenagers. When they can think for themselves. When they can look at both sides and decide where they want to belong. He will be on that throne when the person who built the distance between them is no longer the dominant voice in their lives. And when that day comes, the entire calculation changes. Time is on William's side. Time is the longest, most patient weapon any monarchy has ever wielded. And William knows it. The financial picture tells the rest. The Spotify deal is gone. The Netflix relationship is on shaky ground. The book tour cannot be repeated. The speaking circuit is finite. The product launches have stumbled. Harry is not thinking about spreadsheets. Harry is thinking about 2 children growing up in a California house 6,000 miles from the family Diana built for him. That is what keeps him awake. Not the money, the mathematics of what was lost. His family for a trap he never saw coming. His country for a jurisdiction chosen against him. His mother's legacy for a vision board he was never supposed to find out about. Anger would be easier. Anger has direction. Anger has an object. Anger gives you something to push against. What Harry is carrying right now has no direction. It is the weight of understanding, too late, that the person he trusted most completely had studied him most carefully before he ever knew her name. A man who finally understands his own story is more dangerous to the people who wrote it for him than anything the palace ever produced. Here's what this story is really about. Not California courts. Not succession law. Not title removals or Andrew comparisons. A warning. Diana spent her final years giving her sons one tool above everything else. The ability to recognize when someone wants your world more than they want you. She taught Harry to watch. To look beneath the performance. To ask who stays when the cameras leave. She could not have known how specific the wound would need to be. That the wound her own death created would become the door someone else walked through. The institution managed Diana. Meghan managed Harry. Same silence, different hands. William said what Diana saw coming. Diana saw the type. Diana named the pattern. Diana paid for that understanding with everything she had and still tried to pass it on. Harry, 6,000 miles from the family Diana built for him, is finally hearing what his mother tried to say. Music, not in a speech, not in a palace statement, in the quiet deliberate way the institution says everything that matters. If this story moved you, subscribe to this channel. Not because we are asking, because the next chapter is already being written. And you will want to be here when it surfaces.